We have a pretty straightforward weather forecast to talk about, and summer, after a very, very pleasant week for most of us with below normal temperatures, we are going to move back to something more typical of August in the upper Midwest here. And I'll talk about that in a second. But looking here again at our week in review, on the left-hand side here, these are mean temperature departures from normal. Lots of green across, well, certainly the state and the region. Temperatures averaged out about 2 to 4 degrees below normal. It was the coolest week we'd had here for some time across the upper Midwest. And it was thanks to an upper air feature, a cutoff trough feature that just hung around for a long time over the Midwest. And we had a lot of airflow out of Canada. And I'm going to talk about that in just a moment as well. For some parts of the state, especially across the north, it was a wetter than normal week. But there were a number of exceptions to that, and the southern lower is that area of exception. Many spots in the far southern lower had less than a quarter of an inch. That contrasts again with northern lower and portions of upper Michigan where we had fairly solid 3/4 to 1 inch with some isolated 2-inch total. So again, a lot of it depended on where you were. In terms of degree day accumulation here for the season, these are seasonal totals with corn 50 Fahrenheit base threshold temperatures. The totals are on the left and then the departures from normal on the right. And what you can see with the cooler than normal week, we lost a little bit. Most of the vast majority of the state still is running a surplus of degree days from the beginning of May. One exception up in portions of eastern upper Michigan where we have a deficit somewhere on the order of 25 to 50 units, not a huge deal, but most of the state is running a surplus of anywhere from 50 to as much as 200 base 50 units ahead of normal. So most areas still running a surplus, but it's less than what it was here a couple of weeks ago. Soil moisture, given the changing precipitation patterns, is changing a bit. On the right-hand side here, this is plant extractable moisture in the top 3 feet of the soil profile, and it's in a rain-fed system. And what you can see is that we have above normal. These are expressed in percentiles, with the greens being above normal and the browns, oranges being below normal. So you can see that in the northern lower, where we've had more precip over the last several weeks, we actually are above normal, or at this time of the year, relative to climatology, but we have drifted below normal across the southern lower once again and across portions of western upper Michigan. On the left-hand side here, this is a satellite-derived index of vegetative health, and it's mostly an expression of how much water the plant has to transpire. And again, oranges and browns are dry or drier than normal situations. And I guess the things to note here, we still have some lingering dryness in portions of east central, lower Michigan, especially in the thumb region. But more recently, dryness has increased across western sections of upper Michigan. You can see that illustrated here. For most of the rest of the state, we're doing really pretty well and fairly close to normal, especially as you go into the interior northern lower. I mentioned airflow out of Canada, and we've had a lot of questions. Well, I'm sure if you've been outside here over the last couple of days, and I'm sure you have, you've noticed hazy skies. It was really noticeable this past weekend on Sunday morning before the showers and thunder showers came through and cleared things up a little bit. But of course, we've talked about this before. These are recurring episodes of a smoke plume, mostly out of the western part of North America, the Pacific Northwest, British Columbia, and Canada. There also is a large complex of fires in eastern Manitoba, north of Winnipeg and into extreme western Ontario that's contributing to this. It definitely has over the last several days. This is an image here looking at smoke plumes over North America, and it's been a really, really active year for this because of the drought and the recurring wildfires and forest fires in western portions, lots of smoke on a recurrent basis. And you can see a couple images of those. Again, it's a little bit of an unusual impact. Sunsets and sunrises are really nice and colorful as a result of this. But the question here is, does all of this smoky, hazy condition, does it have any impact on crop yields? And we've got that question, and it's being asked across much of the Midwest. There is an image here, that the one most important one here, I think, on the upper right-hand side. This is a piece of information put together by Renee Dietzel of Syngenta, and it's looking at the change in solar radiation accumulation since the beginning of May up through the last couple days. And the thing to note here is where are we relative to normal? And if the blues, the dark blues, are very close to where we should be for normal, you can see there are areas in northern parts of the state, it looks like that. But as we go to the yellows, those are areas where we've had more of a decrease from typically what we see. Now, I ran a few of these numbers for Michigan from our EnviroWeather system, and I got numbers on the order of maybe 10% this year below normal. And it's because, again, the solar radiation coming in is basically less of it's getting through down to the surface than is typically the case. The other part of it is, too, more of it's being scattered and reflected out in different directions instead of being in a straight line flow, which is typically the case. So both the amount of radiation with solar radiation energy coming in is reduced, and the character or the quality of it. And again, the question is, does this have an impact? And I'll tell a story and I won't even say how many years ago, but for my PhD research in grad school, I looked at the influence and impact of climate on corn yields across the Midwest. And like several people before me and many people after me, of course, what I came up with, what really matters is how much water do you have just before silking pollination and then into the early part of grain fill. And we've known that forever. And my research certainly backed that up. And that was but what I was really disappointed with, I looked at solar radiation. We all know that solar energy is what the plant uses to make dry matter and yield of whatever it is that we want. And I was looking at corn, one of the simplest crops to do this with. And the big disappointment was, no matter how hard I looked, I could not find, this is with crop simulation models, I could not find a link between the solar radiation coming in and the yield. And again, even though that's what drives the system. And the conclusion was that with the natural variability of that variable, it's just not enough to make a difference. Now, there has been some subsequent research to that where people actually used shades and other methods of really, really cranking down on the amount of solar energy getting into the experimental plots by as much as a half, which we really never see. Remember, this is the combined influence here with this graphic of both smoke and also clouds as well. So all those are included together, but we never see reductions that large in the real world with a half. And the bottom line is, with the recent research, it takes a huge, the plants are very efficient in using what's there. It's almost never limiting, and you really have to reduce the solar radiation down to levels 30, 40, 50% below normal, which we just, again, don't observe here to see a reduction in yield. And the reductions in yields, even with those at a half, are on the order of 10 to 20%. It turns out that corn, which is where most of the research has been done, is most sensitive to this. Not that we're going to see those levels of solar energy are that low, but from around tassel, so the beginning of reproductive stages in through grain fill. And you can have fewer kernels per row. You can also have, if it occurs a prolonged time during grain fill, you can have lower kernel weight as a result of low solar. But it rarely, you really have to move the solar down to levels that we don't see. So right now, at least from that perspective, one would say that we have not seen anything that large. Now, there's always a positive and negative to this. One could almost argue that there have been some positive aspects of all of this smoke and haze, and that is that there's two things. One is that, they're related to one another, but that's that solar energy coming in. I mentioned with all of the smoke, it becomes more diffuse. And diffuse energy, which is coming from different directions instead of mostly all coming in the same parallel lines in a direct fashion, it's more efficient at getting into crop canopies, down to the bottom. So we could make the argument that perhaps, even though there's less overall solar energy, more of it's getting down to the bottom of the canopy. That's a good thing. And the bottom of the canopy can therefore be more productive than it would be otherwise. There's another factor too, and we have seen this in the last several weeks, and that's when we do have some of those hazy days, it keeps the maximum temperatures a couple degrees cooler than they would be. And in areas to our west where severe drought is a major problem, and I'm thinking about the Northwest Corn Belt, this has definitely played a role this year with severe shortages of moisture. But because of all the smoke, the maximum temperatures have been cooler. than they would have been. And because of that, the stress levels on the crop have probably been less. So there's always a positive and a negative with this, or a net effect. But right now, one would have to say, based on what we know, that there probably has been little, or certainly not much of a discernible impact on the upper Midwest, including Michigan. So on to our forecast here, and I spent too much time on that, but our forecast, very, very straightforward. Another day of fair, really, really nice conditions, a couple degrees warmer today, may be noticeable. You can see high pressure over the Ohio Valley here. That's our major feature. But just off to our west, we have quite a bit of a plume of Gulf of Mexico moisture funneling and moving up northward. Just to our west, you can actually see the leading edge of that here. This is a radar from about 20 minutes ago. Some of it's made it as far as Minnesota. That will be moving into the western upper peninsula here later this afternoon and tonight, and then very slowly making its way south and eastward across. And I slow with an underline because it's going to take its time. But we will see scattered showers and thunderstorms. This is not a widespread rainfall event, but 30 to 40% type chance, gradually spread southeastward from the northwest part of the state, and then into tomorrow, into other portions of upper Michigan, the northwestern lower, and probably for central and southern lower Michigan tomorrow night and on Saturday. And it's going to stay here. Basically, the system right now is there's very, very little east to west movement. Here's the map for tomorrow, reflecting what I basically just talked about with this slow southeastward spread of precipitation. And then finally on Saturday, you can see a little bit more of the same. Now, for the far northern part of the state, this frontal boundary will bring a little bit temporary cooler air in. But that's only going to be there for a day or two. For most of the state, unquestionably, one of the big messages in our forecast guidance, we are moving towards a warmer pattern. And that's going to be very apparent certainly by Saturday and Sunday. High temperatures will be up into the upper 80s to near 90 probably by Sunday, and continue there for the early part of next week. There will be a continuing threat for mainly scattered showers and thunderstorms. Right now, on an almost daily basis, almost every day we will have that threat there for the state. But I think the best chances for rainfall will probably be late Friday on this first phase, and then again late Sunday into Monday, especially as you move down into the lower peninsula. I think that's when we will see the best chances. And that's this weather system out here in the northern plains. That's the one that moves through here or approaches here on late Sunday, Monday. So those will be the highest chances of precip. And when we throw everything together in the gauge for the weekly total, most areas a half to 1 inch. So a fairly decent week in terms of precip. Some areas over 1 inch, and then the far north and the far south, maybe less than half an inch, which would be the least. But this, again, is a cumulative total, and it reflects probably several days' worth. Now, the other thing that's worth noting, and Chris mentioned this a little bit, talking about spraying, we are looking certainly also at an increase in humidity. And dew point temperatures will be back well into the 60s to near 70 here by the end of the weekend and into early next week. So this is going to heavy dews, prolonged leaf wetting events here. This is the time of the year that it typically happens. And of course, the continuing threat for rainfall. So all these things, at least in terms of disease management, that's something we'll want to be watching here the next week, because it is a big change. We are moving towards a warmer and more humid, certainly extended period of that type of weather. Potential evapotranspiration rates for the upcoming week, because of the increase to above normal levels, again, are going to be above normal. Most spots 0.17 to about 0.2 of an inch per day is what we would expect, with a little bit higher levels by the end of the weekend into early next week. So there will be an increase in water demand here. In the medium range forecast guidance, a lot of consistency, but the big message is here, if we look at the jet stream pattern across North America, and there's a big change. We've had a trough with the nice cool temperatures and northwesterly flow off here for the last week. That's going to be gone. And what you can see here is that the flow across North America becomes more west to east, or more zonal. The big issue is, though, the core of the jet stream circulation is shifted northward, farther up into Canada than it typically is, and it leaves Michigan and the upper Midwest more under the influence of, I'll call it, subtropical air masses. And especially here for areas to our east, these red dots here, these are higher than normal pressures here. So we are looking probably at heat wave conditions somewhere probably to our south and east. I'm thinking the mid-Atlantic or portions of the east, but Michigan's going to be on the northwestern fringe of that. On the temperature forecast here for the 6 to 10 day, 8 to 14 days, almost identical to this. You can see very, very high likelihood of above normal mean temperatures. And this, of course, would cover much of next week, but then the 8 to 14 day, very similar. So this continues on into the week beyond that. The other interesting thing here with precip, with this particular pattern, you can see it also suggests normal to above normal levels of precip. And once again, this is also in the 8 to 14 day time frame. But the most important one, the most consistent theme here is back to warmer than normal and very, very summer-like. We did get a revised 30-day outlook. This came on Saturday from the Climate Prediction Center, and it's very similar to the previous issuances, and it's consistent with the medium range for the mean temperatures here for August, and this is a surprise based on what you just saw, but it's still calling for warmer than normal mean temps for the whole month to average above normal. And in the precip forecast, we're still in that area between drier than normal conditions to our west and wetter than normal conditions to our south and east, although maybe arguably a little bit closer to the wetter than normal than we have been. So no real surprises there, but again, the consistent theme is warmer than normal. That's what most of the guidance is saying. So wrapping up here, a change, another very nice day, a little bit warmer than we've been over the last few days, but we are looking then for an extended period, unsettled, warm, much warmer, noticeably more humid, with scattered showers and thunderstorms almost on a daily basis into next week. So very, very, very summer-like. And then as you just saw with the medium and a little bit longer range, also suggesting warmer than normal. And I'll wrap up there and introduce next week's speaker, Dr. Kim Cassada. So our MSU Extension forage specialist is going to be with us to talk about late season alfalfa harvest. That's next Thursday on the 12th. And we got a 2-for-1 here today. Looking ahead, my good friends, Dr. Bruno Basso, and if you like technology, please don't miss this one. This is in 2 weeks. On the 19th of August, he's going to be talking about the role of precision ag in nutrient management. So again, a couple good talks here, great topics coming up the next 2 weeks. And with that, I'll wrap it up, but I think I'm going to hand it back over to Phil.